Hey guys, it's Cece, and today I am doing a video about books that made me cry. Now, the first thing you should know about me is that I am a crier. I am a book crier. I cry easily and quickly. And so this is not a complete list of books that have made me cry in my life, because this would be a very, very long video if I did that. But these are the books that I think come out the strongest and represent all types of book crying, because there's sort of the, shed a tear kind of crying where you're like, oh, that was really sweet. Or there's the middle of the night, like, sobbing, can't catch your breath crying. And there's really sad crying like that, but then there's also crying when you're really, really happy and something's finally working after so much. I cry a lot at books. Anyway, I'm going to show you 12 books that I think represent all shades of me crying while reading, and I hope you enjoy. So, the first book on the list is River Secrets by Shannon Hale. This is the third book in the Books of Bayern. The first book is The Goose Girl, which is probably the most famous. River Secrets is sort of like the happiest, sweetest kind of crying. There's a scene between two characters, between Anna and Finn, and that is all I will say about what situation it is. But it is so sweet that I was just like overwhelmed and just began crying because it was so sweet. I found it again recently so I could read the scene again, and it was just as sweet so many years later. This is such a cute book. I know it's Razzo's book, but like, Anna and Finn. The next book that I'm going to talk about is If I Stay by Gail Forman. This book is one of those books that I cried, but not like sobbing crying. And I didn't really cry at the end. It was really a scene in the middle. As little as I can say, it is where she suddenly realizes something about her situation. If I Stay is about a girl who, she is in the hospital in a coma, and she has to decide if she was going to stay or if she was going to move on, if she's going to die. And there's a scene where she realizes something about the choice that she's making. I shed a few tears that I had to wipe up quickly, but this book got me. This book got me. The next book that I'm going to talk about is The Help by Catherine Stockett. I don't have my copy here, but The Help made me cry in a few different places. There are certain really terrible things that happen that make me cry, and I also remember at some point happy crying in this book. It's been a little bit. I want to reread it again. It's been a little bit, but there was definitely at least a scene where I shed some happy tears, but this book can get a little, it can get pretty sad. If you don't know what this book is about, it's a historical fiction about this girl named Skeeter Phelan, and she decides that she wants to write a book in like the 1950s about the help, or the housemaids that work in the homes of Southern families. And the other two narrators are Aibileen and Minnie, and they are both housemaids that help her in writing this book. It's in the South in the 50s and the early 60s, and there's some really sad moments that I cried during. It's a really good book. Ugh. The next book that I'm going to talk about is 13 Reasons Why by Jay Asher. This book I read in one straight shot without crying. I was totally fine. And then I closed the cover on the final page, and I cried for 10 straight minutes while the whole thing just sort of hit me. Like, all of the different things that it affected Clay. This book is about a boy named Clay, and one day he gets a box of tapes at his door, and on the tapes are the voice of this girl from school named Hannah, who had recently killed herself. And in the tapes, she gives a list of people who in some way made her make the decision to kill herself, and his name is on the list. This book is not a happy read. It's not like, you don't skip through it just like, oh, I'm so happy. But this is a beautiful and amazing book, and I cried so hard at the end of it. Ugh. The next book that I'm going to talk about is one of my absolute favorites from when I was a kid to even now, and that is Ella Enchanted by Gail Carson Levine. I know this is, a middle grade book. It's a little retelling. I mean, it's just tiny. It's a retelling of Cinderella, But Ella Enchanted I read so many times when I was younger, just so many times, and it affected me and it made me cry every time at the very end. Just because there were so many struggles, and then there's this scene that I cry for Ella every time I read it. It is happy tears, it is sad tears, it is all the tears. It's beautiful. The next book that I'm going to talk about is one that I think is would be on a few lists of people's, and that is The Perks of Being a Wallflower by Stephen Chbosky. And I read this book actually after I've seen the movie. I hadn't read this book, I know, but I did. But this book was so incredible. This book is about a boy named Charlie who is severely depressed, and he has things in his past, and he writes these letters to an unnamed person telling them about his life when he starts his first year of high school. This book is a coming of age book. It's really short. It's really quick, but I think it's one of the most beautiful books. I just think The Perks of Being a Wallflower is incredible, and Charlie, I read this, okay, I read this in high school, and I was in a class when I read this, and I was crying, but like trying not to be crying because I was in school. Yeah, that was great. Great plan on my part. The next book that I want to talk about is Aristotle and Dante Discover the Secrets of the Universe by Benjamin Ellery Sands. This book, I liked it a lot, and I think a lot of other people loved it significantly more than I did, but what sold me was the end of the book when I was crying big, happy tears, basically. I don't cry super hard often at happy things, but Aristotle and Dante got me, and it's such a good book. It is a book about two friends who care for each other really deeply, and they have these really supportive families, but they're just best friends. But there's more to it than that. It made me cry so hard at the very end that I was like, okay, I really did love that book. The next book that I'm going to talk about is Red by Ted Dekker. This is the second book in the Circle series. The first book is Green, but Green and White, which is the third book, neither of those made me cry. Red made me cry so hard. There's just a scene in this book that is so hard to read, but is incredible, and this book is so strong, but it made me cry really hard. This is the first book that goes on the list of, like, ugly tears crying, but so incredible. Such a good second book. The next thing that I'm going to talk about is the Chaos Walking trilogy by Patrick Ness, but particularly the third book, Monsters of Men. Now, I cried in the first book. I cried fairly ugly tears. I shed like one tear in the second book. This book was like ugly weeping. The Chaos Walking trilogy is one of the best written series ever. I think it's amazing. I'd love to read it again, but they're really bulky and intimidating and emotionally draining. But this book especially, I was just, by the end, I made my aunt read this book, and she told me a little while after she finished this third one, she said, I was about to call you and yell at you because how dare you give me this book, which I completely understand. That is the proper response to have, but ugly tears for Monsters of Men, and the whole series, just crying. Patrick Ness, why? The next book that I'm going to talk about is The Book Thief by Markus Zusak. I feel like this is on a lot of people's lists. This is a historical fiction. It is about a girl named Liesel, and it takes place during World War II, and she steals books. But, I mean, it's historical fiction that takes place in World War II. Like, I don't think I can give you the name of a book that fits under that profile that hasn't made me cry. This book, once I reached a certain scene with a specific character, if you've read this book, I feel like you understand this emotion that I just sobbed, because I loved the book, and then I cried for that whole scene, and then I cried for the remainder of the book. It was like that was a tipping point Like, there'd been a dam inside of me, and I was like, I'm not gonna cry, it's gonna be fine. And once that scene happened, it was like, I should just cry for 100 pages or something. That'd be fine. That makes sense. The second to last book I'm going to talk about is an obvious one. It's on a lot of people's lists, I'm sure, and that is The Fault in Our Stars by John Green. If you don't know what this book is, it is about a girl named Hazel, and she has cancer, and she meets a boy named Augustus Waters at a cancer support group, and they immediately fall for each other, but it's about a lot more than that. This is one of those books that I feel like people qualify it as romance, but that there's a lot more to it than just romance. And if you've read the book, you obviously know. This is one of the hardest I've ever cried, ever. It's the second to last, so it does not take the cake. Obviously, there's one more that made me cry harder, but it is one of those books that my stomach hurt after I read it, especially for one particular scene that I hadn't seen coming. It gets me, and the movie got me. I cried for 2 solid hours, variations of happy and sad cry, because then I knew it was going to happen, so everything happy and everything sad, I cried for all of it. I cried a lot during all of it. Okay? I'm weak. I'm weak. Which brings us to our last book, and that is Harry Potter, the whole series really by J.K. Rowling, but again, I picked the last book. Because Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows, just, I cried for, again, like the last 150 pages or so. There's so much to get you and so much to affect you. I cry for a lot of these books. I cry plenty, especially in the later group of them. Like, from like here on, it's pretty free reign cry-wise. But there's just some people in this book that die that I was not prepared to handle. I wasn't ready. It was, if you haven't, I don't even know if you haven't read Harry Potter. I almost said that. I don't know. I know there are some people who haven't read it, but that just makes me so sad. I mean, this book just gets me right in my heart. I want to cry a little bit right now thinking about rereading these this summer, which I'm going to do. Alright, well, after that emotional ride, I hope you enjoyed watching. If you have books that make you cry, please leave them for me in the comments, and we can cry about them together, because I'm weak, as established by this video. Anyway, thanks for watching, and I will see you in another video very soon. Bye!